Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and today's episode is an interview with Hannah Moore. No relation, actually, but she's the founder of Guiding Wealth Management, a financial planning firm based in Dallas, and she is a total rock star. Hannah has had what many assume would be the golden ticket for her career, which basically involved her becoming the succession plan for an older advisor and was actually introduced as a successor before she ever met the clients, before she was barely hired. While she did end up buying that firm and now owns her own RIA, it was anything but easy, and I think her story is one of cautious optimism. She has persevered, but it has been a long and tough road. And what I think is so awesome about her story is that she's gotten to a revenue point that she's actually backing off the gas pedal a little bit and focusing on some other projects that she's passionate about. In her words, she's having fun in her business, and that's not something most folks can say. As always, you can find additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/61. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN radio listeners. You can interact with other listeners, ask guest questions, and more. So without further ado, here is my interview with Hannah. Hey, Hannah, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Alan.
I am excited because you have a very cool story that is going to broaden the horizons a little bit here, because I'm going to go ahead and just tell everyone the dirty secret. Hannah's not fee only, and that's okay. But it's very in line with kind of other guests that we've had on the show, but you've kind of taken a different angle, particularly when it comes to insurance. So I want to learn all about that and kind of hear just, I guess, the way you operate your firm. So I guess to get started, just tell me a little bit about kind of your career path. Have you always been in financial planning? Did you get your degree in financial planning?
Yeah, well, when I was in school, I started off, I wanted to do nonprofit management and had built my resume up really, really well in that regard. I had been working at a nonprofit, doing everything from their payroll for 50 plus people to grant writing to all of their accounting. It was awesome. And I came home one day and it was just like, I can't do this anymore. And just kind of how fate happens. The next day I had taken intro to personal finance class and the professor was like, you need to change your major. And literally in that moment, I was like, okay, like this is done. And then the next day I was supposed to sign up for my last semester of classes. So there was definitely, I feel very fortunate to be in the financial planning world because it was so close to not happening. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into it. I had no idea what I was doing. I just knew that I had always loved personal finance. I always figured that I would be the person, at our church leading, one of the classes that they had on money, not a Dave Ramsey class, but like, the Money Matters or whatever program there was. And I never considered it as a career field. So yeah, I got in. I had to stay an extra semester, so that allowed me to intern at a financial planning firm, one of the large ones here in Dallas for a summer. And it was great. I ended up doing like scanning the entire summer.
A beautiful internship.
Oh yeah. The other interns got to do really cool things and I got to scan. But it was really great because I learned, I read everything. So I knew, I had read divorce decrees. I had read financial planning recommendations all throughout the years for all of these clients. And I felt like even though I was so glad for that summer to be over, I learned so much and it was so foundational for where I went.
That is a very positive outlook on a very terrible internship experience.
Yeah. That's one of my big things. I always hear people gripe about where they're at. And I'm like, but you can learn so much. And if you don't learn that, you're not going to be set up to go further.
It's true. Now, I will tell you that most of the time when someone says, oh, I took an extra semester, an extra year to finish up school, that generally means they wanted one more football season. So this sounds like the most legitimate reason to actually stay a little bit longer in school.
Yeah. And I went part-time and yeah, I know. I never thought of myself. I usually thought of myself as a person that finished in 3 years, but that was 4.5. But so I got out of school and I graduated in December 2008. So jobs were hard to find at that time.
Oh, great time to be getting into financial planning.
Yeah. So I had signed up for a career day here at the Dallas FPA, their chapter here. And somebody found my resume, called me, interviewed me while I was home for Christmas. I drove up and they offered me a job in like January of 2008. Yeah. And so I had been talking, my professor had connected me with this planner in Dallas. And he was just like, I saw her at this conference. She said she was desperate to find somebody good. She doesn't know what she's going to do. So we had been talking probably since like September, October of the prior year, like when I was still in school. And I called her up and I was like, I got this job offer, in Dallas. I'm very interested in working with you. And she was just like, I can't hire you right now. There's just things going on. We can't meet. You have to take this job because jobs are so hard to find. And so I did. And it was a disaster. And so I was there for a whole month.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was a bad situation on many levels. And so it was just a really weird spot. And so the firm owner and I basically were like, okay, this isn't working. And I called the lady that I went to work for, spoiler, the lady that I went to work for, and I was like, hey, like this isn't working. It was like a Friday afternoon that I called her, and we had a Sunday lunch or like a Sunday coffee. And then I had a job offer on the Wednesday. And so the week that I started was the week where the market hit its low in March of 2009. So it was,
which is miserable.
Yeah, I know. So it was great because like I show up and as soon as I show up, the market goes up. So I had like the Midas touch with with the clients.
You're a winner and you're a winner.
Right? Like it's so easy. So yeah, that's kind of how I got into it. When I was in that interview at the Starbucks, she was in her late 60s at that point. And she said, she was like, whoever I hire, I want to be my succession plan. And one of my, I guess you could say, character flaws is I'm always like, sure, of course. I had no idea what that meant. And so I was like, absolutely. Like, I'm absolutely interested in that. And then I'm like going home and being like, what's a succession plan? So it was a very interesting kind of place where I got. So when we started out like meeting clients, I was meeting clients, I'm 22 years old, meeting clients for the first time. Joan is the lady that I bought the practice from. She had already positioned that I'm her succession plan, that I'm amazing, and I can't wait for you to meet her. So I was walking into meetings, 22 years old, 4 weeks on the job, and people are like, we're so excited to meet you. We can't wait to get to know you better. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that that's exactly the best way to go about it, but that's what happened.
It is a great point, though, for the firm owners out there that I know there's always questions around, like, how am I going to introduce this young planner to clients? Are they going to trust them? They're used to meeting with me. And here's a great example of whenever the advisor trusts you and believes in you and thinks you're a rock star and they tell their clients that, the clients believe it. Before they've even met you, they're excited to meet you. So it is pretty easy to build up a young planner in the eyes of a client by just saying they're awesome, which you wouldn't have hired them if they weren't awesome. So you don't have to be scared of that, because that was kind of my experience too with Rick Kaler. He's saying like, he's my succession plan and he's awesome. And clients go, awesome. That's great.
Yeah. And it's really unnerving. So like now I have an assistant. And so I've been trying to introduce her to all of my clients. And we were in a meeting a couple months ago and like she hit it off with these clients. They're talking about like, they're going on a trip to Hawaii this fall. And she's done that exact same trip. Like I felt insecure about it. And then I'm like, wait a minute, like this is what I want. Like I want them to have a good relationship. And so it's hard being the firm owner and passing off that like they're awesome. Like there is a sense of insecurity on that, which shouldn't be, because, if your younger advisor, your client views them as a rock star, then your whole firm is built up. But I think advisors need to get over themselves a little bit on that.
Well, and for the young planners out there, I think we've all been in this position where we feel like, we don't understand why advisors hold on to things. And it just seems so obvious that they would hand off client relationships and do things like this. But when you're in the position of the lead advisor trying to hand things off and you started the firm and suddenly you're giving up control, it is really hard. Even if we know we're supposed to do it and we should be doing it, it's hard to give up, to hand over the reins on some of those things. So Be patient, young advisors. It is not as easy as it looks until you're in that position.
And it's not even just like the emotional insecurity. There's a lot of dollars on this. Like,
it is very true.
Like it's, if you sit back and you're like, okay, fine, I can get over myself. Like I want them to do that. And then you step away and be like, how much is that client relationship worth? So this young advisor, I groomed them for 10 years or 2 years. It doesn't even matter. And they leave. there's some money concerns there too.
Absolutely. So I'm curious how that succession plan conversation went. It really was just like, if I hire you, I plan to make you my succession, and that was just kind of it? Or was it put in writing? Like, how did that all look, I guess, from just a contractual perspective?
I was clearly at a disadvantage because I had no idea. And that was one of my really big struggles because I felt like I was thrown in the deep end. I mean,
sure.
Like I was completely thrown in the deep end. And so there was probably a year, 2 years, I can't remember the timeline on it, but it was a while before we even got down to the nitty gritties of like the details of the succession plan, just because she still had to see if she liked me. I think maybe part of this was a Hail Mary pass on her part, but we were very similar personalities. Like I would imagine that when I'm her age, we're very similar. So I think that helped her comfort level right off the bat. But what was hard for me is that I couldn't find anybody who'd been a succession plan. So everybody was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. You're a succession plan. And I was like, okay, great. So are you a succession plan? And like nobody was. And I remember it was like my first next gen meeting. And it was it was back when there were like 30 people. And I remember going up to somebody and saying, I'm a succession plan. I have no idea what I'm doing. I need to talk to somebody who's been a succession plan. And I'll never forget this. This lady just walked around the room. They tried. It was like 5 or 6 people. And she's like, I'm sorry, there's nobody here who's done that. And it was like such a punch to the gut because I'm like, I'm trying to do this. I want to be smart about it. I want to be a good business owner. I feel like I still have this opinion that financial planners are terrible business owners.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, like exceptionally bad. And I was like, I don't want to be that. So I'd already identified that, but it was just like, how do I do this? And so there was definitely like a long time where it felt just completely overwhelming because there was nobody who had done it. So what I started doing was I started talking to every single person who tried it and failed. And what I found was that everybody's story was very different and like their situations around it were very different. But in every one of those cases, I learned something. So I learned something to not do or to do or, all of these things. So I started piecing them all together. And so that was really how I learned like all the basics of succession planning.
Did you write all of this down? Because that sounds like an ebook. Because I too failed at this twice and just gave up. I didn't continue to pursue it.
The irony is that I'm really cynical about succession plans because why would advisors leave? Like you have to be able to answer that question. So, for a lot of these firms, these advisors are making 6 figures. And if they do it right, they don't have to do any work.
No, it's very true. If they can bring in a young Hannah and let you do all the actual work and they can reap the profits.
Exactly. So there was a point where I had just drawn the conclusion that like, I can't wait for her to retire. So there was a point where this didn't end up happening because of various other factors that we'll get into. But there was a point where I was going to talk to her about going part-time. Like, I'm still going to be your succession plan. I want to go part-time with you. And then the part-time, I want to build up my practice. So I don't think young advisors value what they could build on their own enough, like the opportunity cost, if you would.
No, it's a great point. And, for the young planners out there, again, like whenever you actually do the math and you sit in the firm owner's seat and you think, okay, I have this business that's producing, I don't know, $500,000 in income. In total revenue. And you're walking home with probably half of that, if not more, because we run really high margin businesses. And you say, okay, well, I could sell it for $1 million because 2 times gross revenue, that's kind of the general number that everyone throws around. So I could either sell it to Hannah for $1 million and be done, or I could wait a year and make my $250,000 to $300,000 net again, and then sell it to her for $1 million. And you do that year after year after year because you realize it's a really, really sweet annuity that pays out a heck of a lot more if you hold on to it than if you sell it. So not to ramble, but just to say, again, I was in that position too of doing the math and thinking like, why won't they just, give me equity and sell me the firm? And then when you do the math, you're like, oh, that's why, because I wouldn't sell this to me either.
Yeah. Well, and the messaging around succession plans is, I think it hurts young advisors. I mean, I can't tell you, every time I go to any conference event, they'd be like, oh my gosh, you're a succession plan. You're so lucky. And I'm like, that was what was fed to me. Literally every single person that I said that I was succession plan to. So again, one of the next gen gatherings, they had Elizabeth Jaton was there, and she does a lot of work in the succession planning space. And I remember just like having a conversation. It was like a 20-minute conversation. And I was like, here's the deal. And I just laid out everything. And she looked at me and she was like, you need to go back and you need to quit on Monday.
Wow.
She's like, this is not a good deal for you. And it was the first time where anybody said, like, this isn't such a great deal. Like, it was one of those, like, pivotal moments where I was just like, oh my God, you're right. Like, this isn't the silver platter everybody has been telling me that it is. Like, this is a business decision. And, like, I have options. And it completely changed my mindset going into the succession plan and going into all of negotiations, if you would call it that. Completely changed everything for me.
Trying to remember the advisor to give credit to for this quote. I think it might have been Suni. I've mentioned on the show a couple of episodes ago, but out of Colorado. But I believe he was the one who told me, as a young advisor, always come from a position of power, not from a position of weakness, because you don't realize the power you have and the options you have. Anything that you're doing, whether it's negotiating a succession plan or deciding to go start a firm or anything that you're doing, you know, negotiating that first job, you have a lot more power than you realize. And I think many of us kind of come from this scarcity mentality. We watch all of our friends, you know, struggle to find jobs after college and they're scared to leave their job because they don't know if they'll find another one. That is not financial planning. I don't know many out of work financial planners. We get gobbled up really fast, and you probably get a lot of job offers after you are a firm owner because people are very attracted to hiring prior owners. So, like, to your point, come from a position of power. You do have an infinite number of options. I think it's actually challenging to narrow them down and decide what you actually want to do.
Yeah, I completely agree. The people that I have the most respect for, like the young advisors, are people who've been offered equity in firms. And they're just like, you know what? I'm not ready for this. Like, I don't know that your vision is what my vision is. And one of my big things with succession planning is you have to have a bigger story. Like, the succession plan cannot be your story in the industry. So, like, what is it that Hannah Moore wants to do with her career? And does a succession plan fit into that? Rather than, this is it. Like, this is the end goal, you know?
It's a fair point that succession planning is held up as like the ultimate, and no one ever asks, like, is that what you really want? Is that a good fit for what you want? You know, to buy a book of business of 65, 70-year-old clients, like, maybe that's a great fit for you, or maybe it's not.
Well, and who are those clients? And how is a business run? I mean, there's just so many things that go into it.
So you come back from the conversation with Elizabeth, who is fantastic, by the way. So very, very instrumental in FPA, particularly with the retreat conference. But so you come back from that conversation, you go sit down with your employer. What do you do on Monday? Do you just quit?
No, I do not quit. It was up north, and so that's where my family is. And I ended up going with them to a baseball game afterwards because they're up there. And I told my mom, I was like this. I'm like, Mom, like, this is what I was just advised to do. And my mom was just like, well, don't be a fool and don't listen to her. Like, you have to listen to what she's saying. That doesn't mean that you have to do that action, but like, you need to understand why she said that. And then you need to like let those reasons inform whatever you do. And so I think that's what really happened. And so like, I went eyes wide open going forward. So how my deal kind of worked without getting into too much detail. Well,
you can share as much or as little. So folks out there, sometimes we fall under very strict non-competes and non-disclosures, and we don't want to embarrass folks that we have worked with in the past. So share as much or as little as you can.
Yeah. So the thing with Joan and I was that we were so similar. Like, everybody was trying to make this up into this like thing you have to negotiate, but like, we already knew what we wanted to do. And what was neat about it is that we were protecting each other in it. So like, I was being like, okay, so here's our terms, but I think we need to add this in to protect you. And she was saying, I think we need to add these things in to protect you. So it was a really cool, like, negotiation, not negotiation, but just like this coming, like, we just agreed. And so that was really neat. So when we get down to sign the contract, unfortunately, you're not the only parties when you work in different systems. And so we brought in somebody else because we don't know how to drop these documents. And she was going away on a trip for 2 weeks. And she was like, I want this done. I'm leaving Saturday morning. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, we have our sheet here of everything that we agree with. And somebody from the broker dealer came in and Thursday afternoon came into my office and threw down a buy-sell agreement and said, here's your buy-sell agreement. You're signing it tomorrow. And I went home and I read it and I was like, no, wait a minute. This isn't what we agreed to.
Oh, so they changed up. Basically, she had kind of her intention and they kind of messed with it a little bit, probably to make it their own.
Yeah. So one of the things that she was really insistent on was that I could leave the broker dealer if I wanted to. In that buy-sell agreement, I was signing that I would stay there for 10 years.
Whoa.
And I mean, there were just a lot of things like that were in there that were definitely were not what I agreed on. And so the next day we go in and had a very, very contentious meeting. And they definitely had the people involved definitely had the perspective that I had no room to negotiate, that I was getting my career handed to me on a silver platter and you have no room to negotiate was actually the line that they said. So it was very heated. And I was like, this isn't what we agreed to. And so I've left the broker dealer since then. But one of the things that I realized even after this is that I was always going to be like the little girl Hannah, like regardless of what I did, just because that was just how that culture viewed me, because the average age was like 55 or something crazy. And so I was just this young person and I was never going to be able to really stand on my own. So anyway, at that meeting, I was told, well, we'll just talk to you and we'll just answer all your questions next week, when she's out of town, like when she's out, and like, then you'll understand that this is a good deal for you. And so it is a very interesting time. And so the next week, this is why when I taught, I've already harped on this a little bit, but it drives me crazy when I hear young advisors being like, I'm only doing paperwork. Well, yeah, you better know that paperwork better than anybody else does. And like, you better know those systems better than anybody else does. Because the next week I'm sitting in this meeting and like, they're telling me these things. And I'm like, but I know for a fact that you're wrong. and they're just like, well, no, this is how it is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I know what you're talking about better than what you know you're talking about. And I know that you're wrong. So all of that went down. And when Joan got back, the conversation was, yeah, we have a buy-sell agreement that's in place, but if something happens to you, I'm walking. Like, I cannot agree to those terms. And so we had lots of different conversations about this. And this was like this ongoing thing and just how succession plans happen. I mean, it's never easy. And so we ended up going to our own attorney and drawing up all the documents ourselves that overrided that original contract and just kept it between the two of us. So that's kind of how we did that. But
so just to be clear here for the people out there, so you don't have to go through your broker dealer if you're going to be doing a buy sell or anything or a contract. It sounds like y'all did that because out of convenience sake, but it was not necessary.
I would talk to your broker dealer.
There you go.
Each one's going to be really different. So we were at an independent broker dealer, and so we had a lot more freedom than like some of the captive agents that are out there.
That's very fair. Because some like Edward Jones, you cannot sell your book. I remember a guy was trying to sell it to his daughter and he couldn't. Edward Jones owned it. There was nothing to sell. And when he left, he basically had to give Edward Jones all of his clients and his daughter couldn't do anything. So now that's an extreme example, but that's a captive audience there. To your point, there are probably a lot of different ways this is done.
Well, and you have to know, so where I was at, like, you owned your clients. That was like a really big deal. So all of the paperwork that you sign when you start is actually really important. And even if you don't, because I had no idea what I was signing when I was 22, like no idea, but I kept copies of everything. And then I went back and I read it. And then I kept talking to more people to understand how their systems were set up so I could better understand how mine was. I think that is so incredibly important.
And it's annoying, I know, to go through and try to read every detail of every document, but you do need to know, one, before you sign anything, especially if you're getting your first job or getting in with a firm, like you need to know what life looks like and that it sounds really rosy when you're getting a job, but what happens when things go bad? What are you going to do? You need to be looking at it from all angles. And sometimes it's probably advisable to go ahead and have an attorney review anything you're going to sign just to be sure that your bases are covered and you're not, setting yourself up for a bad situation later on.
Yeah. And when you start a job, you don't know. You don't know if you're going to be there for a year or two. Then it's well, who cares?
Right.
But when you start getting serious about things, if you don't understand those things, you're not ready to be a business owner. I talk to people fairly regularly who want to be succession plan. I'm in the succession plan. It's well, do you have documents? Well, no, not yet. Well, if you're not willing to have those conversations and have those hard conversations, you're not ready to be a business owner, because those are you're just going to have to keep having those conversations. There's some sense of if you want it, you got to have the hard conversations.
And if the firm owner's not willing to have those conversations, you're not the succession plan.
Right.
They're not willing to sit down and start talking about valuation and process for them retiring and all of those various pieces. They're not ready to actually initiate this at all. So maybe you need to start looking for something else.
So I completely agree with that.
You work with the attorney, you do your own drafting of documents. So you purchase the firm from her at that point?
Yes. So it was later on. She had some just outside situations that what caused her to retire. So I got married through all of this. And so we got married, and 10 weeks later, I bought the practice.
Nice.
And so as you do, you spend all your money on the wedding. And so we had $500 to our name. And we were long distance. So my husband had to move to Dallas, and he still hadn't found a job. And so it was extremely high stress time in my life. And so, it was very, very stressful. And so we started moving all the clients. One of the things that I was really insistent on, because it wasn't every situation is different, but with this one, I was very much you own it one day, the next day I own it. I don't want to do any of this joint rep crap that I've seen happen. Yeah. So I own it, and I'm oh my God, what do I do? Because this has really been truly my only job. And so from just that outside perspective, I didn't have it. So I knew all my bills were coming up with the broker dealer in that middle of that month that my $500 wasn't going to cover. And it was high stress. But what I did is, I don't know if you know Deborah Fox, the Fox Financial Planning Network. I had seen her stuff, and it was how to run a financial planning practice. And it has every process, everything you could want. And so this is the only time I've done this in my life. But I went and I put that on a credit card, and I was I need to implement this right now. From day one. And so I started going through that and just being so I had checklists for everything. I had the way that we had done it, but I wanted something else. I wanted that various perspective. And so I think that was very instrumental in helping me be successful.
So give me a timeline. At what point is all of this happening?
I bought the practice January 1, 2013.
January 1, 2013. Okay. So we're 3 years in at this point. And so just so folks know, Deborah Fox, she's actually speaking at XYPN 16. So she's doing a session on college planning because she has a couple of different businesses. She is a master of several different focuses, but they have the Fox Financial Planning Network, which you mentioned, which I believe is being rebranded. So I'm not sure when that is kind of switching over, but they're kind of they're basically just a really, really detailed process engine on every step you need to take to do everything within your firm. So if building processes and such is not your thing, you can, license, I believe it's an ongoing licensing. And I think they just launched some next gen focused processes as well. So it sounds like that was really helpful for you in terms of not having to build that all from scratch and reinvent the wheel.
Right. And what was great about it was I'm very drawn to the financial planning side of it. So with this practice that I bought, I had one friend who mentioned it this way, and I was that's perfect. Any product from the 80s until now that's been on the market, that was in the practice. And so it was this hodgepodge of everything. But what I loved about her process is it was how to convert that into a financial planning practice. So I took my existing clients, and she had scripts. She had the whole bit. And so what I would do is I would find clients, and I would pitch them I want to do a financial plan for you. This is how much I charge. And would this be something that'd be of interest to you? Every client during that point said yes. And I was coming back to them and asking them for more money, and they were all saying yes. And so I really started to develop what does my financial planning process look like? Because before it was always sitting across the table. Yeah, we'd run some stuff on Money Guide Pro, and a lot of it was back of the napkin type stuff and conversational. And I really started transforming it into a defined process. This is what it looks like. This is the value that's added. These are the deliverables, everything like that. So it was a really cool time. to kind of see a lot of that come to fruition.
And it's the side of financial planning, I think, it's hard to shine a light, and you've mentioned this in a few different ways, but like on what it really means to run a business. You do have to develop processes, and that, you may be a great financial planner, but how are you going to do planning? How are you going to sell that planning? How do you calculate a fee? There is so much that goes into running a business that it can feel overwhelming. I mean, but it's something that has to be done. And, it's probably why a lot of the older practices that have technology from the 80s, you just kind of get this inertia where they just don't want to make any changes. But if you're going to buy a firm from them, you're probably not only going to be implementing all this stuff, you're also going to have to be implementing new technology and converting data and all that.
Yeah. And I think there were like years where I just felt like I was treading water, and it was so frustrating, and I was just so exhausted, but I was so compelled just to keep learning and keep consuming all this information. And so there were several points in my career where it was just like you felt the reward from that. And so that was one of those where it was like I had done all of this work beforehand where it felt like I was just treading water, and then it was just done. There's payoff for just the grind, if you would, of just learning everything.
So is that really where the payoff came, was when you kind of felt like you had, line of sight on everything that was happening, or was there something else in terms of just kind of getting to that point?
I guess the biggest point where I would say the real payoff came when I started my RA. So even with this financial planning, I mean, people thought I was crazy. Like people literally, like I was told multiple times, you just like to spend money. Like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, but I have to know this. Like I have to do this. So yeah, I guess the biggest point where I felt like I was finally just like, not everything made sense, but all the work paid off was really when I started my RIA.
So you bought the practice, was still with the broker dealer. Did you have your own firm name, your own brand, or were you using the broker dealer's brand?
So what I did, I believe it was in 2013, I came up with a DBA. So I wanted the clients, because the lady I bought the practice from, she used her company name was a broker dealer name, right? And so I wanted the clients to see a transition, not just from advisor to advisor, but I wanted to see it from Joan to a company. That was really important to me. So I did guiding wealth management. So in like the letter to the clients, it was, she's retiring and you are now going to be serviced by Guiding Wealth Management and Hannah's a lead advisor. So a lot of that was because I knew that I didn't want to stay with the broker dealer long term, and I wanted clients to be associated with that brand. And so, yeah, so all my business cards, website, the whole bit got changed to that.
Did you have to get all of that approved by your broker dealer? Did they have any pushback?
No, they were really supportive of that. I think I was with a really good broker dealer.
Sure. You may be evil, but you're not as evil as the other evil people. No, I understand. It can always be worse.
Yeah, so it was very independent. And so there were a lot of people who did it that way. So it wasn't like some of the broker dealers where like that's really frowned upon. People legitimately were like, why are you doing this? Like, this doesn't make sense. In fact, the majority of people that I was around at that point, that was their feedback to me, was like, what?
I guess I'm confused. Other advisors were confused as to why you were changing the firm name?
Yeah, other advisors. Because everybody who was there, it was almost everybody had it just by their name. And they're just like, well, you're the person.
Oh, I see. So it should be more financial planning or Hannah financial planning or something.
Yeah. Or you just need to keep it like as the broker dealer name because, they're this big national group and you're just the advisor. Like, why do you want to create your own name? Like, that doesn't make sense.
I gotcha. Isn't it funny? Advisors, especially younger planners out there, know this already because we've all experienced it. But advisors are just like anti anything new, any change, any new technology, any new marketing idea or niche market, or you want to launch a podcast. You're always going to hear negative feedback. So just get over it. People are going to tell you how stupid it is, and you just have to get over it and understand that they have their opinion, but they don't own your business. And it's the beauty of being an entrepreneur is that we get the freedom to screw up in our own ways and as often as we choose. And so you will always hear negative stuff and just let it roll off you, hopefully learn something from it. Maybe, as you said earlier, try to see it, or I guess as your mom said, mom tip of the day is, try to see it from their perspective and then figure it out for yourself. So don't be discouraged just because a bunch of advisors tell you something can't be done. So you rebranded and then kind of in that process, and then you went the RIA route and kind of broke away from the broker dealer. So at what point was that from a timeline perspective?
So that was like March, April of last year. So 2015.
2015. So, okay. So you stayed with a broker-dealer for about 2 years, kind of transitioned the brand, and then started the transition over to the RIA. So like you said, you were independent, so you owned your clients, so you were able to just kind of open the RIA and transition away.
Yeah.
So how does that look? And just because I've never been with a broker-dealer, how does that look from like an investment perspective? Did you just go, start a relationship with like TD Ameritrade, Schwab Fidelity kind of thing, and then just, repaper all your clients? Like, what does that process look like?
So I did it differently than most everybody I hear. So when I was at the broker-dealer, I was using primarily third-party money managers for various reasons. So, okay. And also when I was at the broker-dealer, I had anywhere between 200 and 300 clients. So it was a lot to manage. And so with like the top tier of clients, that's what we were doing with all of them. So all advisory, third-party managers. And so when I left, I actually didn't have a relationship with any custodian. I just had my relationships with all these third-party managers that I maintained. And so for the clients to move over, they had, because all of their paperwork was done through the third-party money manager. And so the paperwork was actually extremely easy to get them, because basically all the third-party money manager was doing was like, this account's already established. We're just changing who the advisor is.
So the money was with the money manager, not with the broker-dealer being managed by the man. Oh, nice. That's a convenient.
So, I mean, one of the things, and this is where I think it's so important for people just to understand the landscape and to just talk with so many other advisors is, the broker-dealer was putting out like third-party money manager like products that they wanted their advisors to use. But I mean, even back to when, Joan was running it, she was so adverse to it because she's like, it gives them so much control. Like you are just at their mercy at that point. Not at their mercy, but you're tied to them a lot.
Yeah, you're more tied than you may want to be.
Right. And so they were trying to incentivize it with various things, but I always was like, no, I want my own third-party money managers. Like I want a relationship directly with them. And so, yeah, it turned out to be a really, really wise decision for me. When I started my own RIA, I had all of my clients, what I told them, how I positioned it to my clients was all that's changed. The guiding wealth management is staying the same. I'm staying the same. The only thing that's changing, like who I outsource my compliance to, was kind of how I positioned it. Obviously there's more that goes into it than that, but and when I made the transition, what you said about like positions of power, I had a friend who was like change management. She's like, always the only thing that your clients care about is how this improves them. So it improved my clients. I had a nicer office to meet in. Even though I paid less for it, I had a nicer office. I had better technology. I started using the eMoney portal, which my clients love.
I'm curious if the price of the third-party money manager was different when you went with them direct instead of through the broker-dealer, because I'm sure the BD was getting a cut.
Yeah, the price stayed the same to the client.
Okay. But you got to keep a lot more money. We've had people, I've heard anywhere from 15% to 85% rev share, so they're never good, but you were able to pocket more money. I don't know if you were able to lower fees, but obviously you had more costs, but it is a different world when you don't have to send that check every quarter to the broker-dealer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the irony was I took like 18 clients with me and my revenue essentially stayed the same.
How many clients did you have there? Before you left?
It was between 200 and 300. There was a point where I just gave away a chunk of clients that were just low assets. But yeah, anywhere from 200 to 300.
Okay. And again, for the folks like me that have only worked fee only, like that makes no sense. To have 300 clients is just an absurd number, right? Like most of us have 50 to 100, but it is a different world when you're primarily selling or doing, smaller asset management, that sort of thing. So,
or you're just taking orders. I would get phone calls from people being like, okay, so should I buy Coca-Cola or Pepsi stock today? And I'm like, I don't know. And like you had to like jump through all these, it was just craziness to me. And I was like, when I moved, I was like, I want people who value my advice. So there were a lot of people who I had good relationships with, but they didn't value my advice. And so they didn't get the invitation. That's how I put it. The invitation to come with me to my new firm. It's like, that's important.
So what was currently what's your fee structure service model for your existing clients?
So I basically just do an AUM fee.
Mm-hmm.
When new clients come in, I'm very insistent on like how important the financial plan is. So like I have two demographics of clients. One is like that near retiree. And then I have my successful Sallies, as I like to call them, who are seeing tremendous success in their profession and high income. And so for both of those demographics, I'm charging anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 for a financial plan and then investment assets on the back end.
Okay.
Yeah, I now have a relationship with TD, and so I'm managing all the assets now directly. I do have some smaller clients, and I'm trying to figure out like the best way to service them. So not smaller clients, but people who are coming to me. And so I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts on that. Not quite sure where I'm going to land on that yet, but.
Well, there's this organization called the XY Planning Network. Honestly, I mean, that was the piece that we were all battling. It's like, we know how to serve pre-retirees, right? Like we've got the service model and the business model. It's like, what do we do with everyone else? And the first decision is, do I really want to work with them? Am I actually going to do so? And if so, what's the service model? And it can be a lot of different things, from courses to podcasts to monthly retainers and anywhere in between. So how many clients are you at right now, or asset level? Just kind of what does your overall firm look like at this point?
Yeah, sure. I am in like the low 20s on clients. I want to stay a boutique firm right now, and that could change. I mean, we have lifestyle things. We don't have kids. We want kids someday. So for the near future, like that's really important to me, like that boutique feel and that style. I manage about 14 million total in assets. It's the measure people like to use.
Yeah, I don't like asking the question, but since you're AUM, it's a gauge of kind of where you're at.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, go pull my ADV. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I work primarily from home. I'm at home right now. I have an office. It's like a Regis office, except it's nicer. That I rent conference room hours. It's like $350 a month. My clients love it. It's a great location. So I work out of my house primarily. I mean, it's like an office setup. I brought in a professional organizer to help organize it. I have an assistant who comes in 4 days a week, part-time, and she works in the bedroom across the hall. And again, it's set up like an office. So
gotcha.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like there's a bed in the corner, none of that, So it helps my mindset too. Like it's really important for me to have a space to work. And so it's helped with that working from home for me. So yeah, I do that. I meet with clients, in person once, twice a year. I answer all their emails, phone calls. Yeah.
Because I saw that you posted in the VIP group for XY Planning Network that in response to someone else that you have actually stopped taking new clients. So you've got, you're in the low 20s, you've got, 14 million in assets, and you've stopped.
Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Okay, so you haven't stopped taking new clients. You've just slowed the flow. Kind of what is the transition you're going through right now?
Sure. Well, okay. So let me just back up a little bit. So when I left the broker dealer, I mean, I busted it. Like I was working so hard and I was so just like exhausted from like the time I was 12 until now. Like I've just worked. It's always been just working hard, like to extremes. And so I reached a point last year where I was just like, you know what, Hannah, like you're done. Like, not you're done. Like, you're going to manage what you have and you're going to do an excellent job at that. But all of this push to like get new clients and to do all these new things, like I took all of that pressure off of myself. And it was really neat. It was like the first time where I feel like I've just allowed myself just to rest and just to stop, kind of that pushing forward. And it was really, really, really good for me. There's a book that I'm such a fan of, and it's really helped me. It's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, but it's so my husband's always told me that I was really creative, and I've always been like, you're crazy. I'm a numbers person. Numbers people aren't creative. And so I don't know. So through that resting time, I've seen what so many other people have done, kind of reaching that direct to the public space, and I've been interested in it, but nothing's ever felt right. Like, I don't know how to describe that. Like, I've tried to have people write blogs for me, but like, it never felt right. And so kind of in that resting time, if you would, there was just like, I was like, I need to make a workbook. I need to make a workbook for couples who've never been able to talk about money together. And like, I just had this like vision for it, and I don't know how to describe it other than like, I had to create it. Yeah. So I put together this workbook for couples, $45 price point, hard copy type of deal. So what's funny though, is I wrote it and I was like so excited. I was like, oh, it's done. We're going to go to like send it to the designer next week. And I have an assistant who helps me, and she's like incredible. And after a week, she comes back and it was like completely tore up. And I'm like, oh my God. And she was like, oh, I used to be a book editor at another job. I'm like, of course you were. Like, what weren't you? But yeah, so we put it together and yeah, now it's live.
So have you gotten good traction so far in terms of sales and having people go through it?
Oh no. I haven't sold a single thing yet. So I have this vision for it. And, here's the thing is that like it could completely fail. And I am totally okay with that. I had to create it. Like it was like this thing that I had to make. I think it would be very, very helpful for people. So I've networked with a bunch of bloggers. The first round is what I've been doing is I've been sending it out to people just to get their feedback. So I have a number of couples who are actually working through it right now, basically because I have this idea, but I haven't actually tested it. And so it's still kind of in that beta testing, if you would. Yeah. So I've been listening to a lot of bloggers, kind of listening to that world, getting engaged in that world because how you market in the blogging world is so different than how you market in a financial planning world.
Oh, it's so true. So just to kind of recap and clarify, to be sure I'm on the right page. So you kind of have this, and I think we all experience this feeling for some reason. It's just like the push that we must grow our firms, right? We have to grow and just grow and grow. And you finally had the realization, which I think is extremely powerful and very rare. And that was like hey, it's actually okay if I want to chill out for a little while. Like I'm making good money. I love my clients. I don't have to grow if I don't want to right now. And it sounds like you use some of that time because honestly, new clients are from a time perspective, the kind of the exhausting side of working with clients. Like, while we do a lot of work for our clients, they're not nearly as time intensive once they're on board and you have the relationship and you kind of know where things are at. So, and that was kind of where this idea of, hey, I want to do a workbook. I want to try something different, put it out there and go through that process. So what do you think is your goal on the back end? Is it that this will allow you to start doing more work with young couples or couples in general and be able to help? Is it that, ultimately it's a fun experiment and you'll go back to your planning firm? Like, do you have a vision for what this thing's going to look like?
So I'm very much like strengths finder. Like I am the visionary, like that, like the Myers-Briggs, like that's my personality. Yep. So I think that there's a lot of places where it could go. And this is so against everything that I am, right? But I feel like I'm playing. And so like I have goals. I see so many options that could happen, but I'm trying to like reel myself in from that and just say like, if this helps 10 couples, like then it was worth it. Or if it helps 100. So it's really,
we'll kind of find out kind of thing.
Yeah. Like we'll kind of find out, see, the feedback. We're getting really good feedback of it. I think that there's a ton of potential with it, but I don't know. My husband and I were talking a while back and I was like, I want to have a small firm. Like that's important to me. Like as weird as that is. And so counter to what everybody thinks you should have. I was like, but I want to have really big ideas. And I feel like this is a really big idea or a way to put big ideas out there. So yeah, I want it to make money. I want it to be independently profitable. I don't want it to be one of those deals where, you talk to other people, it's like, well, you do this so that you get clients in your firm. That's not my mindset. It's more of like, I really believe in this product. I really believe that it'll help people. I hope it does. So it's not quite a good answer. I know.
No, there may not be a right answer. It's kind of part of being a futurist and being an entrepreneur is, again, you get to experiment. You get to play a little bit and no one can tell you no, which for me was a little dangerous. And it's why I have very much appreciated having Kitsis in my life. And that is because, mom tells me that I can't do things sometimes, which is okay. I still do them sometimes. You do get to play and kind of see what works. And it's awesome because you have a business that does support from a financial perspective, your ability to play a little bit and try a few new things and just kind of see what happens. Because worst case scenario, you created an awesome workbook for couples that whenever you work with couples, you can put them through. That's cool, and best case scenario, it blows up and you suddenly have a TV show. I don't know. Like, who knows what that ends up being?
Right. Like, who knows? Yeah. But it's me. Like, when I finished it, it's like, like a part of me. It's like I send out to people as corny and cheesy as that is.
So you also launched a podcast. So tell me a little bit about kind of what's the purpose of the podcast and who is that for?
Yeah. So when I was going through all of the succession planning and I was desperate. I was looking for any resources that were out there. There was Patrick Daugherty and Trudy Turner here in Dallas were doing a seminar series called You're a Financial Planner, Now What? And I swear to you, it was the best content that I've heard in the profession. I'm not sure if it was just because where I was at, probably, but it was so good and it was so helpful. They talked about the detailed business stuff, what it means to be a financial planner, like just everything. And I just soaked it up so much. So they retired from that at the end of last year. And so I took it over with another person. And so what I did was this content needs to be out there. And so we record all of the in-person meetups that happen. And I've done some various interviews. And so we have, a podcast for financial advisors who are just starting out into the profession. Like, what do you need to know? What do I wish I would have known? And really the driver is because I desperately needed this, when I was 22, 24, 26. And so that's kind of my motive behind it, if you would, kind of my giving back.
Sure. So for any of our college students or, folks career changing in or just kind of new to the profession, if you're in that first job, check out Hannah's podcast. How can they find the podcast?
So it's at financialplannerpodcast.com, or you can find it on iTunes. Or, it's also for people who don't know what a broker-dealer is.
I'm actually amazed by the number of people that don't know that and have been around a while. So
if you feel like there's just areas where you're just I need to fill in gaps. I don't understand who this other person, how they fit in. It's a great podcast for that.
And later this week, Hannah's going to have an extremely famous, amazing guest on her show, and his name is Alan Moore. So I'm thrilled to actually switch it around. I don't get to be interviewed all that often, so I'm excited to be on the show.
Yeah, that'll be great.
But yeah, so for anyone out there, I know we get bugged all the time for creating more episodes, and weekly is about all I can manage. And sometimes we miss that. So if you're looking for more content, check out, you said Financial Planner Podcast.
Yep, financialplannerpodcast.com.
So, you said that the podcast was your way of kind of going back and teaching things that you wish you had known. So I guess as we close out, ask you the famous last question now. And if there is one thing that you could go back and tell younger Hannah Moore, one thing you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
Shoot, that's hard because
there's so many, right?
Right. Well, and it's so hard because people are just oh, you've had it so easy because you've had a succession plan. And I very much disagree with that.
Totally.
I think my advice would have been, which is what I did, it was just to stay really curious and keep learning and keep making networking and drawing connections that you never think you'll have to use, because I have had to use those. But yeah, the stay curious.
It is amazing whenever, networking cannot be overstated. And you remember our career counselors in college were always always be networking, get out there and meet people. It'll, change your career. And we're yeah, whatever. Meeting some random guy at a conference is not going to help me. But, I met a random girl at a conference named Hannah Moore. That's how I met you. That's how I meet most of the people that I know in the profession. And it's amazing that when you need to know something, when you have a question, when you need to have, if I'm looking for people, for guests that have cool stories, I know enough of your story to know it was a cool story. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had you on the show. So it's get out there and meet people, because it's amazing the power that your network will have for you one day.
When I left the broker-dealer and started my own RIA, it was I got a lot done in a very short amount of time. And the reason I was able to do that, I ended up writing a list of every single person that I talked to in 45-day time period. And it was 40 people. And I did not previously know those people, but my network knew them. So I would send out an email to just a very short list of people, be here's exactly what I need. I'm making this transition. Here's my one question. Because when you get in those spots, you need specific answers. You don't just need somebody who's, I've started my own RIA. And it was the time when I was oh my God, I am so grateful. I put all that work into this.
I love it. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for taking the time to come on and share your story. Again, this is just awesome. And for anyone out there who tells you had it easy, you did not. So the people that have it easy are the ones that sit associate advisor positions for their entire career and never have any desire to do anything different. So that is the easy route.
Some days I'm jealous of them.
I know. I totally understand. A salary? What is that? So, but again, thank you so much for taking the time to be on today.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Alan.
I am so glad that I was able to get Hannah on the show because she is just such a wonderful story of success and perseverance, and just goes to show that while many people think of this profession as a man's world, it is ripe with opportunity for female advisors. Don't let the old guard of financial planners get you down. You really can create the life of your dreams and build a business to support that life. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.